What's up guys, welcome to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the water beast. So I did do some videos before for each of the elemental raid beasts and also the light darks of course, but they've come to us have made some changes to elemental rifts. So for the elemental ones, i.e. water, wind and fire, they've increased the defense a bit for these bosses, but at the same time, if you have elemental advantage against the boss, you will do an extra 50% damage. 50% is a huge boost, and like for me overall, like every single of my raid teams have been improved, at least the elemental ones. The light dark ones not so much, but definitely for fire, water and wind, it made my teams much more consistent triple S, and I think it helps everyone a lot. And overall, even though they buff the defense, overall you should be doing more damage. Alright, so you can see here, this is my highest amount, highest damage on this boss so far, and this is the current team I'm using. Now you can see there's a few weird and interesting units that I'll talk about a little bit later, but let's talk about the mechanics of the boss first, while we do a couple of runs. So the first main aspect that you have to keep in mind about is the freezing effect. Alright, so this is the main unique mechanic of the boss. So what you see him do is freezing roar, and after freezing roar, your units will get a blue attack bar, or at least most of it will be. It will start off, with a very small green bar and then a large blue bar, and as your turns progress, it goes green again. So basically it's like a temporary destroy effect, which reduces your max HP. So obviously you want to get rid of this so that you can tank the hits from the boss, and to get rid of that you have to gain attack bar. So you can either use it with a attack bar boosting ability, for example Bernard's third ability will do that. Alternatively, the other way is just your natural attack bar gain, which is based off your speed, and also whether you have a speed buff or not. So obviously speed buff is very important for this, as well as all the other usual debuffs and buffs, which I'll talk about in a second as well. Alright, so obviously you would like to stack a pure wind team for this as well for the extra damage, but you can do like a pure water team as well as an alternative. I used to use that before they did this change, and even after the change, I was still trying that team out, which is it was heavily stacked in water, apart from the homunculus, and it was still doing triple S most of the time. So you can do it. It's just that it will be less consistent because you don't get the extra damage. But a lot of people will start off with a lot of water units to begin with, because you probably have built a lot of them already. Now, as for the attack bar boost, I think this is a very important thing to talk about. There's a lot of units that you can use for this boss to complete that role. Right. So the most important thing about elemental raid beasts is you want to make sure that you have particular roles fulfilled, and then the units themselves don't really matter. So you don't need to copy my exact team. You just need to use a unit that does what you need it to do, whatever role you need it to do. So obviously the first role is attack bar boosting. Now most people will start off with Bernard, and you should already have a Bernard just from your Giant's progression already, right? So that's going to be like an automatic inclusion in your team. You can also bring a secondary attack bar buffer if you need to, preferably someone that does an additional effect. For example, you could bring something like Megan or Bastet for the attack power buff that they provide. Okay, that way you don't have to have a Chasun or something like that to do your attack power buff. That means you could also run something like a Bella. Bella is very good for this because not only does he heal, but he also increases your attack bar. So one heal from him plus Bernard's speed buff will pretty much get you to unfrozen again. But obviously if you run Bella, you need to cover the attack power buff somehow. So options for that would be like Megan, Bastet or Galleon. There's also the Wind Barbaric King, which It's a very specific unit for this. Like he has some other niche uses, but I think for the most part, most people would build him for this raid. Although you can definitely use him in other things like PvP and stuff like that, or even giants. But he's less commonly built unit unless you're like you specifically need a unit for water based. Other attack bar boosters that you could use are Purian. You can use Wayne. Purian is the water inferno and Wayne is the water bounty hunter. They both do. Wayne does the same buff as Bernard. So if you're stacking a pure water team, you probably just use Wayne if you happen to have him built. But you can just use Bernard if you want. I used to use Wayne because previously, like the elemental damage wasn't like as big as what it is now. So I used Wayne before because he did more damage than Bernard. But now I think Bernard would probably do more damage, especially if you stack a bit of like crit damage or at least some crit rate onto it. Because he scales off speed, so he actually does quite a lot of damage. And you probably would have noticed that already from just like from PvP. He hits pretty hard against when he crits, things like or any water unit like Filmars or something like that. Alright, so those are the main attack bar boosters. Then you need your attack power buffer. So as I said before, the common ones would be Chasunin, the Barbaric King, Megan, Bastet, Galleon, right? You just need to make sure you have at least one. You can bring two just to make sure you have the uptime for it a bit, more reliably. But you just need one mostly. If you can bring like a free turn attack power buffer, that's even better. I believe Bastet does a free turn buff, so that's why, in my opinion, she's pretty good for this. But obviously, she's a Nat 5, so not everyone has that. Alright, so then you should have covered your attack power buffer and your attack bar boosting already, right? Then you want your debuffs. So the main debuffs that you need are obviously defense break, branding, and slow, attack speed slow. Those are the main ones that you would like to bring. Slow is not as important. Out of those three, it's the least important. But if you can put it in without like gimping your team, then definitely do that. But the most important is getting the reliable defense break and branding. Those are what are going to increase your burst damage. And you want to try to have at least 2 units that can do it, preferably on skill 1, but skill 2 is okay if you're running 2, like 2 units that can do it. So basically you want like one main defense breaker and then like an additional unit that can also help out with defense break. Like it doesn't have to be first skill, it can be a second skill just like as a backup basically. Same thing for branding. You want at least 1 unit that can do it, but if you can fit into like a second unit, then it's even better for consistency. Because you might have some trouble with the AI. He may not necessarily do it on turn 1, on the groggy stage, and therefore you'll lose out on quite a lot of damage if that happens. So running like 2 units that can do it, or even 3 units if they happen to have it. Don't go out of your way for 3, but 2 is what I would aim for, and that should be good enough. Now, as an example on my team, I have Mardela that does defense break on first skill because she has elemental advantage. The Drunken Master has a third skill that does defense break. Bernard has a second skill that does defense break. And even the Homunculus also has a defense break on third skill. There's a lot of third skills there, so that's like obviously the least reliable. But there's so many of them that, and I'm not losing any damage by running these guys either. So because I need them to fulfill certain roles anyway. So so I can get defense break up quite easily from that. And then as for my branders, I have the Homunculus and also the Barbaric King that can do it. Then obviously after that you also want your healer. As I said, the healer would generally be like Bella or Chasun to begin with. So if you don't have Chasun, just use Bella and then use something else to attack buff. Now, once you settled on these, you probably have like 3 slots for DPS. You just wanted to use the best DPS you can get, like single target burst damage. Preferably that if they should also have debuffs where possible. So now let's go through some of my units, and I'll also talk about some of the alternatives for them as well. So first off, we have Mardela. So Mardela is well, she's pretty much farmable. She's in Nat 3. I believe there's a secret dungeon for her too. So no real excuse not to run her. So the description of this doesn't tell you exactly what it does, but if you look it up on the Wikipedia, if you have elemental advantage while using this skill, it will do a defense break. So that's obviously very good for the groggy stage, because like more often than not, you should be like the unit will be using first skill, right? Or at least like I would say about 50% of the time it will be using the first skill, and therefore it's a pretty reliable defense break on first skill. Second skill is just a burst damage skill that scales off speed, which is quite nice for this. So any DPS unit that you run, ideally you should either have a speed slot 2 or like a swift set if they have high base speed and like speed subs. Okay. The reason for this is obviously so that you'll gain enough attack bar during your normal turns to help get yourself out of the frozen effect. Now my Mardela is on like a standard like vampire revenge build for R5, but you don't have to put her on vampire. You can also put her on any other standard damage set like blade plus broken sets, or a fatal set, rage, swift. They all work. Vampire is nice if you're putting her in the front line though, because it helps her heal up. It's also very synergetic with her passive. So the passive reduces her rune requirements significantly. A 25% crit rate is pretty huge. So that's why my Mardela only has 60% crit rate, because she'll get the 25% from passive and also another 15% for elemental advantage. So the rune requirements for her are very low, so there's not much excuse to like not have her in your team. Also, when her health gets lower, she has higher crit damage, so this scales very well with, or like, it helps synergize well with vampire. So she'll do large burst damage when she's on low health, and then she'll heal herself back up using with that damage. Now, most importantly here, she has win attack power lead. So usually what you should do when you build your elemental team is try to build it around a particular leader skill. Now I think, to me, attack power leads are the best to build around, because you should generally be aiming to get your units to max crit rate. Now obviously for the elemental beast, you should have elemental advantage, so your crit requirement is actually only 85, right? So and I feel that it's not too hard to get to 85. If you are like a little bit under, it's not too big of a deal. But it's much easier to build around that than having to make sure that all your units have like are within crit rate range for like a crit rate lead, for like Philmars or something. Because then if you're using them in other areas and you're running, say, like an attack power lead in other areas, then those units won't have max crit there. So I'd rather have my units all universally built in the same way, so they all should have max crit rate for whatever area they're running in. That way they can scale off any attack power lead. Now, as far as replacements, I would say there's not really a replacement for Mardela. She's farmable anyway, so not much excuse for that. Now, next up we have my Quan, which is the Drunken Master. So I built this guy specifically for the water raid. The reason why I put him in the water raid is because he's got 2 heals, the second skill, and also the third skill. Now the third skill is a heal over time. It's like a flat heal, alright? So it doesn't scale with anything in particular. But the second skill is a heal that scales off attack power, and I really like attack power scaling healers in any rift scenario, because You want like strong heals, but you also want the unit to do a bit of damage rather than just like a full tanky support that does nothing else. So that's why I decided to build him, and it's been pretty consistent at the moment. So he's on just like a standard violent build, speed, attack, attack. Obviously the attack is to scale out his heals, or his second heal at least, and it helps him with his damage a little bit too. Now I will try to build him without violent, and see how it goes next time. I feel that it should still be okay. There should be enough heals, especially with the heal over time, because that gives you like a little bit of like healing while he's cooling down his other heal, and it just lets you top up your units, you know, each turn. He also has a defense break on the 3rd skill, which is quite nice. Now, obviously, the alternatives for him would be something like Bella or Chasun, which I talked about earlier. I would say those are the 2 main healers, but you could also probably use something like a Miang if you want to. But I think Quan is a little bit better because he's got that elemental damage bonus. But if you built Miang already for R5, you could still use her in here. Okay, then we have Bernard. So don't be frightened by my stats. Like, I know my Bernard's going to be faster than most people's, but you don't need him to be this fast. You can still get away with, like, I would say even like 250 speed, because my Wayne used to be about 240 to 250 speed, and he was still doing fine. Like, he was he's doing the attack bar boost perfectly fine. And I didn't have any troubles before. So obviously with Bernard, he scales with attack. He scales with speed on his 1st skill. So he actually does pretty good damage if you put him on like crit damage build. But obviously only do crit damage on slot 4 if it's your fastest rune. Otherwise, just use it like a standard sort of like whatever is your fastest rune. 2nd skill is a defense break, which is quite nice. And 3rd skill is obviously the attack bar increase and attack speed increase. Now I do find on auto his AI is pretty good in that he'll usually use 2nd skill whenever it's up. So that's pretty good for the groggy stage. Now if you don't have an Mardela built already and you want to get into elemental raids, you can still use Bernard and run him as an attack lead. So he's not as strong as Mardela's lead, it's 5% less, but it's a backup, in case you don't have an Mardela. As for replacements, Wayne is probably the main replacement, but he's a water unit though, so he doesn't do as much now. So I don't recommend doing that, but I mean, Bernard, you should already have him anyway. It's whether you want to supplement him with another attack bar booster or not. Next up we have my Homunculus. So Homunculus, if you don't have one, I would suggest just running another unit that can do branding, right? So if you're running the Barbaric King already, you could run something like a Stella or a Helia. Helia is the Dark Harpy. They both work here. Obviously they don't have the elemental advantage, but you can still do pretty good damage with it anyway. So obviously for my build, I'm using branding on 2nd skill and also branding on the 3rd skill. So he's got 2 chances to brand, which makes it a lot more consistent. You know, I have a pretty high chance to land the branding early on because I have both him and the Barbaric King doing it. Apart from that, he doesn't really do much else apart from just like a bit of damage. But I would try to focus him towards having a decent amount of accuracy, right? Because he's going to be your primary debuffer. Especially because his 3rd skill does defense break at the same time. That's a very powerful ability. It applies both the damage debuffs in one go, and if he does it at the start of the groggy stage, then you're going to do a lot of damage. So pretty much standard sort of speed attacker build otherwise. Now if you don't have any other spare branders, so if you can only fit one branding unit in your team, that's still fine. Just instead of running the Homunculus, then just run another damage dealer. Any burst damage dealer is fine. Things like Tark, Fielmars, the Chimeras like Teo and Lagmaron, Tasha, or you should have Mardela already. You can use Kung Fu Girls, they'll also work as well. Okay, now next we have the Barbaric King. So if you haven't built a Barbaric King before, alright, I would recommend building this one for PvE purposes. You can, if you happen to have the light one, he fulfills a similar purpose in that he does branding, and you can be using him in all rifts. But this one does have the elemental advantage here, and therefore he'll do more damage than the Mimir would. Now as for his build, I think just a standard speed attacker build is good for him. So that's pretty much what I've done here. Now the main reason to use him is the third skill, which is it's actually an AoE damage ability, but so like the damage on single target is not very high. But the main thing is he does damage while also doing attack power and attack speed buff. So I think, like, to me that's a very good ability to have. It also means that you don't have to run Chasun. The reason I say you, don't run Chasun is because she wastes turns using Fallen Blossoms, because everyone's going to take roughly equal damage. So Fallen Blossom is not a very good heal for this sort of fight. Same sort of idea for R5. A lot of people are moving away from Chasun if possible, and using other healers instead. The only real reason to use Chasun here is for the attack power buff, but if you can cover it with the Wind Barbaric King, then you don't need that. And you can use something else like Bella. And also he has branding effect on second skill, which is obviously pretty nice for the groggy stage. Allows you to do more damage. First skill doesn't have anything particularly special, since you can't dot the boss. Alright, next up we have like Gamir, if I can, there we go. Alright, so a lot of people probably will be wondering why this guy. Now the Hellhounds all do pretty good damage, like single target damage. So that was what mainly drew me to him. The other thing is, I think his passive is very interesting. So this one is, the lower your HP, the higher your attack power will be. So obviously it's good scaling, especially for the non-groggy stage. It will allow you to do a bit more burst damage, and that will mean that you can kill the boss quicker, basically, right? So like overall the run won't be as long, because the main time sink in raids is actually killing the boss during the non-groggy stage, right? Because he's got a set amount of health, and it really depends on how much damage you can deal, within a certain amount of time. So that's why, like, the lesser progressed players probably will take like a few minutes to actually finish the whole run, whereas like the late game players probably only take maybe a couple of minutes. Now his first skill is a life leech ability, which is quite nice. It also benefits off having the enrage passive as well, so he can leech back quite a bit of life, which is quite nice. Helps keep himself alive a lot easier. It makes it less stressful for your healers, especially because the Hellhound itself is quite squishy. I mean, the base defense is only 395, which is very low, and his base health is less than 7k. So try to give him a little bit of defensive substats to make sure he doesn't die too easily. Second skill is just a standard damage ability. Does a big burst damage. So yeah, I mean you could probably put him on Vampire just to help him leech a bit more life from the second skill. But I think it's not necessary. Personally I like a Swift set, because he's got very high base speed, 113 is very high, and that will allow me to run attack slot 2. So similar way to how I would build a Tark, right? Because Tark doesn't need to be, he wants to be fast, but not faster than your other units, because you want him to team up with them to reduce their cooldowns. So obviously the replacement for Gimir would be Tark, right? They pretty much do very similar things, except that Gimir has the elemental advantage, like the damage bonus. So overall he should do more damage. But Tark is something you're probably going to build for other stuff anyway. He's pretty good in pretty much every single raid beast, apart from obviously the wind the wind boss, but every other one you can use him. So you probably build him first, and when you're ready to build units specifically for the water beast, you can consider something like a Gamir. Alright, so other units you could use things like Filmars. Alright, so people should have Filmars by now. So, because you would probably won't get into Elemental Risk for like at least half a year or so, and in that half a year, you should have enough pulls to get your 5 Ifrits, and therefore you'll get your guaranteed Ifrit from the mission, and therefore you should have Field Mars by now for that reason. Now Field Mars is a pretty good single target damage dealer. Plus, if you build him a tanky Field Mars, you can also put him in the front line. Especially because he has a second life, that helps make sure like when you're like very close to killing the boss, you know, he can endure through an extra couple of hits before he dies, and that will like, you know, protect your backline. But with the passive also, he can do like a little bit more damage before he like, you know, finally dies. So I have seen when I was progressing. I used to use Phil Mars, and there were times where he was like the last man standing. There's like a sliver of health, and he managed to kill it for me, and otherwise I would have wiped. So yeah, he's another alternative you can run. Alright, so I think that pretty much covers it. This video is actually a lot longer than I thought. I'll try to keep the other ones a bit more brief, but overall, just to summarize, you want your attack bar boosting. You want speed DPS units, right? Obviously your supports will probably be fast anyway. You want speed buff, your attack buff, and then your standard raid debuffing, so defense break branding, etc. And I think that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And until next time, good luck with the water beast, and have a good one. Bye bye.